What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm JT, and I am here again with Lewis from Lewis Carlyle Photography. We're going to be cracking open another beer, and we're going to be talking about the 10 do's and don'ts of landscape photography.
Alrighty, let's start with the beer.
Boom.
Yeah, baby.
What are you working on?
I have a all-day IPA. It's called a Session Ale from Founders Brewing.
Sounds pretty good. I am still working on a Guinness, so again, my favorite, going back to the Guinness. So 10 do's and don'ts of landscape photography. Some of these, as we were talking about earlier when we were making this list, come off as common sense to us who are out shooting continuously pretty much. And they're kind of like muscle memory. We don't even think about it. So it took us a couple minutes. It was a little bit of a struggle to actually come up with this list because, like I said, it's like muscle memory. It's stuff we don't even think about. But things that we may think of as common sense may not be common sense to everyone else out there. So let's jump right into this list. And at number 1, we have do not share locations. Now, this one is fairly controversial. I see people, fighting to the death on both sides. People who don't share locations. It's unfortunate you see locations get vandalized. People who do share their locations tend to think of people who don't as being selfish. Lewis, what's your take?
Yeah, I think that the first question that comes to anyone's mind when they see a beautiful image on the internet is, where is that place? And it's easy to ask that question, and especially if you're a landscape photographer, that's probably one of the most imperative questions that you can ask about a specific location. Some places are very well known. You have the Grand Canyon, the Grand Teton, Arches National Park, Maroon Bells. Here in Colorado Springs, we have Garden of the Gods. So I think the idea of sharing locations can be somewhat compartmentalized and broken down into varying degrees. For instance, if I shoot a picture of Garden of the Gods, I'm going to write Garden of the Gods on it because it's such a distinctly well-known location, and it also is a very, very, very high-level tourist attraction. And as such, the city of Colorado Springs has built an incredibly efficient infrastructure that enables thousands of people to visit this place every day. So it's not one of those like super delicate ecosystems where if you take one step off the side of the trail, you're going to kill some special moss or some type of bacteria, right? It's a place that has been designed to accommodate a high volume of tourism. And so if you're in a place like that and you shoot an image, okay, yeah, this is the Grand Canyon. These are the Maroon Bells. This is Garden of the Gods Park. But if you are in a more intimate location, maybe you have a secret waterfall hidden up in the woods somewhere that only you know about, I think JT makes a really good point, because don't share that location, because the minute that you share a place, it no longer becomes sacred. It's almost like the internet has shut down any and all places that are sacred. And the next thing you know, you've got people going up there, probably making their own trails, leaving garbage, doing graffiti, doing all these kinds of things. And it's not cool. So if you have a special sacred location, just keep it to yourself. It's all right. Let it be your own thing. Don't share that location.
Right, and do not give in to the peer pressure on Instagram, on Twitter. Let people call you names if they want to on there. Let people call you selfish, but you'll see it's a lot worse when you see that location destroyed by people that just, want to go up there, graffiti, smoke pot, leave their beer bottles, and after maybe a year or two, this place that you knew of, you got some amazing photos, is completely destroyed, and that happened to me with a couple locations. I've seen over a year one place just get covered in graffiti and no longer accessible to anyone. So I think it's an important tip to not share locations. So let's hop into a do not number 2, don't step in front of others. And again, this seems fairly obvious, and when you set your tripod down, you get all set up, you get your shot framed up, there's a nice mountain with the reflection and the sun's about to come up, and I would think that it would be enough common sense to not come and put your tripod in front of me, but I can't count the amount of times that I've gotten all set up. It's taken me 20 minutes to get my shot framed up. My exposure is perfect. The sun's about to come up in about 5 minutes. And then someone comes up 5 minutes later, slaps their tripod right in the middle of my shot. it's apparently not common sense.
Yeah, it never fails. I feel like there needs to be a bit of an unwritten rule in the landscape photography world. The first photographer who gets out there on the location, that person sets the parameter. Everybody else has to be next to or behind that person. If you're the early bird, you deserve the worm. So don't go walking right out in front of somebody's shot. Don't get in somebody's shot. Just respect the fact that they were there first and that you need to remain out of their image.
And I think that is really all that needs to be said. It's just stay out of someone else's way if they got there first, period. That's really it. So that leads us into our do not number 3. And again, this one should be common sense, but clearly it is not when I'm going on a trail through Rocky Mountain National Park and I'm seeing beer bottles, energy bar wrappers. Don't litter. Please don't litter.
Do not litter. Have respect for the land and the landscape. You wouldn't litter in your own front yard, so don't litter in the national park. Don't litter in the state park. It's pretty easy to, the old Boy Scout rule is you pack it in and you pack it out. So if you eat a candy bar, then stuff that wrapper in your pocket and take it back with you. Don't leave it on the trail. That's definitely the fastest way to desecrate a sacred and holy place. Humans, we put enough impact on the natural environment as it is. We don't need to add litter to that. Just a lot of places are so delicate. Just by walking around, you can cause damage to a landscape, especially if there's lots of moss on the ground or anything like that. But yeah, don't litter. That's a no-brainer. And take that advice to everything you do. And I think we could probably even take that one step further and say, if you see trash on the ground in a national park or in a national forest, pick it up. Right? It's not your responsibility to do that, but it's the right thing to do. So, and it's not that hard. If you find a water bottle, some people have honest mistakes. Maybe they just misplaced their water bottle. They're going along on a hike and they just forget it. So if you find some trash on the side of the trail, just pick it up and take it out. It's not a big deal.
Absolutely. And if you weren't going to add that, I was going to add that in, because when you see one piece of trash that for some reason seems to embolden other people to throw their trash wherever they want to, and 99% of the time, that's within 10 yards of a trash can that is right at the tip of a trail. And that's what infuriates me the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I think probably a good 30 years ago, America went on this big campaign to try to combat littering at large. And I know when I was a kid in school, we were pretty heavily indoctrinated with, don't litter, don't be a litter bug. Don't be that guy. And, hopefully that can kind of stay with us throughout our lives. But yeah, if you see something, pick it up. Take some pride in our national parks, in our nation, in the beauty of nature.
Simple enough. So let's move on to our do not number 4, which is do not stray off the path. Lewis, you want to take this one for us?
Yeah, for sure. This type of kind of protocol, it takes me to Oregon. And when I think of Oregon, I think of all these gigantic temporal rainforests where there's just beautiful green moss covering everything, growing everywhere. And, if you have a hiking trail that goes through a forest into a specific waterfall, call it Ramona Falls, Proxy Falls, one of the big famous waterfalls in Oregon, it's important to, try to respect the environment, because again, you as a hiker, as a tourist, as a visitor, you are creating an impact on the landscape. And we can minimize that impact if we do our due diligence and stay on the trail. You don't really need to go bushwhacking through the woods to be able to get a great image for your landscape photography portfolio. There are plenty of trails that will lead you where you need to go. And so try to stay on the trail as much as you can. This is not only for the environmental aspect, but it's also for your safety. If you get to crashing through the woods and you come across a pit or a snake or a cliff, there are a lot of ways you can get injured if you're off the path. And if you sustain a mechanical injury while you're out hiking and you are not on the path, there is very little chance that another hiker is going to come along and find you and be able to provide help. So while it might kind of seem like, oh, you don't tell me what to do, I'll go where I want to. But honestly, staying on the path is just good common sense for your all-around safety and, to help reduce the impact on the environment.
And I think that is the perfect segue into our do not number 5 is don't be stupid. Don't do dumb things. Don't go climb up a mountain unprepared, because there are consequences. Even if it is just you by yourself going somewhere, or you and a friend, you have to think, if you get lost somewhere, if you break your leg climbing up a mountain in some unreachable area, how are you supposed to be rescued? Is the national park going to have to shell out tens of thousands of dollars for a helicopter to life flight you from this location to a hospital? Is a search team going to have to spend 48 hours and tens of thousands of dollars to come rescue you? There's just a lot of kind of unseen consequences. You think it may be a simple thing, going off the trail, climbing this little cliff, trying to get to this little location, but doing one little stupid thing can mean a lot of consequences, a lot of money, a lot of damage, heartache to a lot of other people other than yourself. So if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, don't start a 5-mile hike at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You're going to run out of daylight. Be smart about how you approach the wilderness. So yeah, don't be stupid. That's an easy one.
All right, so we have covered what not to do in our top 5 don'ts of landscape photography. Let's talk a little bit about 5 things that you should do when you are doing landscape photography. So number 1, make yourself of service to others. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think this is twofold, really. When you go out into the world, into the wilderness with your camera and your backpack and your tripod, you represent the photography community. Like, you represent photography at large. And if you make a positive impact on the sort of hiking and outdoor community, then you make a positive impact on behalf of photography in general. You don't want for people out there in the world to be like, oh, those photographers, they're always dicks. They're always getting in the way and littering and doing all the things on the top 5 do not do list, right? So, start by avoiding the do not do list, as we mentioned earlier, but also, it's okay to make yourself of service to others. If someone is out there maybe kind of struggling with their camera settings, lend them a hand. Be like, hey, have you tried this? Maybe try this tripod. Put your bracketing on. Make sure you get your focus. It's really easy to just be nice to somebody and be of service to somebody. Nothing bad can come out of you doing a good thing for another person. And that's just a life advice in general. It doesn't necessarily always have to be a photography thing, but if someone is lost, give them directions. If someone says, hey, how much farther to the waterfall? Try to give them a detailed description. Just be of service. And everything that you do and every positive influence that you make out there reflects positively on the photography community.
Yeah, I think you made some great points. Basically, just treat other people the way you want to be treated. If you're lost and not sure which way to the waterfall, give somebody a helping hand. And I think karma kind of comes right back around at you, whatever you're going to do in that situation, however you decide to handle it, whether you treat people the right way or the wrong way. So let's hop into our second do, and that is to get there early. Again, one that kind of seems like common sense to most landscape photographers, but I see a lot of people shooting landscape, and they may or may not know any better, in the middle of the day with just killer sun, no clouds, and I feel bad, but sometimes that may mean hopping in your car at 3 a.m. to get to your sunrise location by 5 a.m. Kind of our situation getting out to Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yeah, you want to be able to, there's a reason why the photographers call early morning magic hour, because when the sun rises in the east, it basically paints very strong orange, red, yellow, colorful light along the earth. And so right as the sun is rising, that is when you get what they call that golden hour light. And those make for probably the greatest images. If you see a beautiful sunrise, you see a beautiful sunset, that's because, the sun is just on the horizon and it's painting beautiful light across the landscape. You don't get that same quality of light, as JT mentioned, in the middle of the day. The sun is all very up high and you kind of have this like omni flat light. So getting there early is essential. And this is essential for a number of reasons. Number one, there's likely not going to be anybody out there. So if you want to have a nice landscape image with no people, no tourists, no hikers, no whatever, get there early. If you're out shooting before other people are even out of bed, then your chances of having a location all to yourself are obviously vastly improved. The other thing that you have to do is, so we have another do that's going to come farther down the line here talking about planning, but you kind of want to reverse engineer what's going to happen with your sunrise. So if the sunrise is at 7 a.m., that doesn't mean that you are on location at 7 a.m. That means you're on location at 6:30, a solid half an hour before the sun comes up. That's definitely kind of an important measure that you have to take. So you have to plan, all right, what time does the sun rise? How long does it take me to hike to this place? How long does it take me to drive to this place? And you sort of need to reverse engineer that timeline to ensure that you are on location a solid 30 minutes prior to the actual magic hour, as it were, which is more like magic minute, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's great advice that comes down to, exactly how long is it going to take for you to get out of bed and get into your car in the morning, and sometimes throw an extra 30 minutes in there just in case. So let's talk about our next do, and that is to be prepared when it comes to equipment, apparel. Make sure you have everything with you that you're going to need while you're out there. We talked in our last podcast about neutral density filters. It's doing that research about the location. Maybe bring a little bit extra equipment that you might think you don't need. For example, polarizers, neutral density filters, just in case things break, things go downhill, tripods bump into things, ND filters and UV filters bump into things and crack.
Yeah.
Being prepared.
Batteries and media cards. Make sure you have ample supply of both of those. Just having only one battery in your camera is a recipe for disaster, because even if you fully top off a battery, there are many ways that you can very quickly destroy that battery. If you're working in cold conditions, batteries tend to drain a little bit faster. If you're shooting time lapses, batteries go pretty quick. If you're shooting video, batteries tend to go pretty quick. So it's just a no-brainer. Bring extra batteries. Don't get caught out. There's nothing worse than witnessing the greatest, most miraculous sunrise of your life and having an inoperable camera because you're either a dead battery or you forgot your media cards. It's like, yeah, you get to watch that in person, but you didn't, you're just going to have to tell people about it because your camera's not working.
Yep, and I have a quick story for that. I decided one time to be the dummy that brought one battery and one camera body to Glacier National Park. And the battery died on the 8-hour drive because the D3 is not the best for conserving it is chugging through battery power, even if it's on in standby mode and you're not taking photos. Leaving that camera on for 8 hours in the back of the car killed the battery.
Yeah, that might be your first. That might be your first problem as you're shooting on a Nikon.
But otherwise,
that's a whole nother podcast.
Otherwise, those batteries last forever. But I was not planning ahead. I did not bring the extra equipment and did not bring a charger. I was going to be there for a week and didn't bring a charger.
That is a very good point. Not only should you have extra batteries, you should definitely have a way to charge those batteries, and that includes a car charger, because the landscape photography world involves a great deal of travel. You're going to be driving long distances from point A to point B, so you need to be able to charge not only your camera batteries, but your quadcopter, your helicopter batteries, your phone, your devices, any of the myriad devices that we use, GPS, in order to kind of go out into the wilderness and into the landscape. So have the ability to charge all of your stuff in the car. And there are a number of really nice inverters out there you can get where it kind of like the charger plugs into the cigarette port of your car. I don't know, do we even call those anymore? The cigarette port, the charging output. And it'll kind of convert that 12-volt stream into an inverted thing. And it's just like one of those power strips that has multiple plugins. So get one of those for your car. And most of them come with USB ports as well. So you can charge your cell phone, you can charge your camera batteries, you can charge your helicopter batteries, you can charge the little portable batteries that you use to charge your cell phone on the fly. So yeah, there's no excuse to be at a dead battery anytime in 2021.
You do it one time and you learn your lesson. Yep. So I think that kind of segues us into another section of this do, and that's to also be prepared when it comes to your apparel, what you're wearing. Are you wearing boots? Are you wearing a rain jacket, a hat? What's the weather going to be like Maybe not when you step out of the car, but 2 hours later.
Yeah, yeah. There's kind of the old adage, always dress in layers. I feel like that's good advice. So, I mean, I'll typically have kind of like a base layer, which is just sort of a microfiber, sort of long sleeve shirt that kind of starts off on the bottom. It doesn't really have a great deal of thermal value, but it's almost like wearable sunscreen. So if you're out and about all day long, I prefer to wear long sleeves to short sleeves, just because, you know, when your body's soaking up a little bit too much vitamin D, you know, that's no joke. You know, and then you're going to want to carry some type of a jacket, like a fleece or something that has a good thermal value. And then on top of that, you're going to want sort of a shell, like a Gore-Tex shell, which will protect you from wind and rain. So you've got your base layer, your thermal layer, and then your rain layer. And that will probably get you 90% of the way for most of the places that you're going to go. I'm kind of thinking in Colorado terms here. You know, we went on a trip up to Rocky Mountain National Park not too long ago. I believe it was in June, and we hiked at 4 in the morning, and it was probably 35 degrees. So, you know, it's just a few degrees above freezing when you start off your hike, and then, you know, you come down a couple hours later when the sun is up and it's 70 degrees. So you need to be prepared for a wide range of temperatures, and you need to make sure that you have extra real estate in your camera bag so that you can take off a layer, you can add a layer. You know, don't pack your camera bag all the way to the brim with nothing but camera gear. As fun as that sounds, it can get you in trouble because your apparel is actually very important in the landscape world.
Right, throwing an extra pair of gloves, even if it's not cold, you may be scrambling over some rocks. Just extra protection, extremely helpful. And even if you are in the middle of the woods and you're in the summer, your head is going to be baking in the sun. So some sort of hat, even if, you know, it's 80 degrees, you're not worried about your head getting cold. Worry about your head getting too hot, overheating, heat stroke, stuff like that. It's important.
A hat is a great idea. And sunscreen. Never leave home without sunscreen. Always keep a permanent small container of sunscreen in your camera bag so that it's always there and you are never without it. I can't tell you how important that is.
Even in winter, I've got sunburn skiing, snowboarding.
Yep. Yeah, in winter it's even worse because the sun comes down, it hits the ground, it reflects off the snow, and so it's almost like having two suns baking on you. It might be chilly out and you're not thinking about getting sunburned, but you can get a wicked sunburn in the wintertime.
So let's hop into do number 4, and that kind of goes along with being prepared. And how do you be prepared? You plan ahead. And that's something that, especially in landscape photography, if you're going to be hiking 5-10 miles out into the middle of nowhere, what's the weather going to look like? What's the forecast? What does your trail look like? Maybe do a little bit of research on, you know, maybe some extra gear that you're going to need. Talked about scrambling, climbing out some rocks.
Yeah, there are definitely a number of really, really excellent resources that you can use to plan your trip. And planning starts in your house at your computer. Before you even go outside the door, before you ever put your boots on the trail, there are a number of resources, and I would recommend a couple of things. I'm a big fan of a website called Alltrails, alltrails.com. It basically is kind of like a Google Maps for the trail system out there. And people can log on to this website and they can report on trail conditions. That's very important, especially in Colorado. We got a lot of snow. Certain times of the year, if May, June, you know, people are going out hiking, and if we've had a snowy winter, sometimes the trails are still impassable. And so hikers will go out and they'll hike the trails and they'll be like, hey, I can only make it to mile 4. I didn't have snowshoes, so I had to turn around. That's incredibly valuable information if you're planning on going up and shooting a picture of a mountain or a lake or whatever. So Alltrails is definitely a very good one. In the landscape world, I would say that we live and die by the weather. Clouds are of the utmost importance. So you're going to want to know, are you facing a completely sunny day? Are you facing a cloudy day, rainy? Obviously weather.com is an easy one. I'm a big fan of an app called Ventusky, and it basically shows real-time satellite images of clouds. So it's basically like a Google Earth perspective, and it shows you exactly where all the clouds are. So if you have lots and lots of clouds to the west and it's very, very clear in the east, that means the sun's going to rise in the east and it's going to have a clear path to hit the clouds to the west, and so that might be good for sunrise. reverse all that information, and that you might have something good for sunset. Or you may just have nothing but solid cloud cover all day, in which case say, all right, well, let's go do a waterfall because, we don't really need sunlight for that. So yeah, being prepared, knowing how to get to where you're going so that you're not wasting time getting lost, that's very important. And then knowing the conditions that you are going into, that's all very, very important.
And I'll hop in and I will second All Trails. I love using All Trails. I have the app on my phone. And like you said, other people can give their advice on especially the difficulty of a trail. They can say this trail may be marked as XYZ, but it is an extremely easy stroll where you can take your kids and your dog, or it is a difficult hike that's going to take you grappling gear and the rest of your bat suit to be able to get to the other location that you're going to get to. So love All Trails. It gives you the ability to download the trail so that if you lose cell service, you can still connect to GPS with your phone and get to where you need to go or get out of where you need to be. So lastly, we're going to go to tip number 5, and that is represent the USA with respect, especially when visiting international locations. And I think also representing the photography community, as you kind of mentioned earlier. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, in this day and age here in 2021, America is at a bit of an all-time low for international respect. There are a lot of people who they watch the news, they watch social media, this and that and the other, and we kind of look like a bunch of basket cases who just don't have our stuff together at all. So if you're traveling internationally and you're in a position to where you meet people from other countries, represent USA to the best of your ability. We need personal ambassadors out there who are friendly, who are courageous, who are kind, and who are willing to help out when necessary. If you make a personal impression on a person from another country, then that personal impression is going to go so much farther than anything they ever see on the news or on the radio. So, represent USA with respect. Have some pride in our nation. Get out there and you say, I'm going to ensure that people love America after I get done with them. And that's what I do anytime I go there. Conduct yourself with respect, be helpful, be kind, and that goes a long way. Trust me.
People talk, and if they run into that one dick from the United States, they're going to tell their friends, and things just spread. And also photography as well. Even if you're shooting, if you're not from the United States, if you're from Korea and you're interacting with other people from Korea, how are you representing the photography community? Are you that jerk with the camera, or are you someone that, like we mentioned earlier, doesn't litter, respects the trails, respects the outdoors, respects the locations that you're shooting, and helping to preserve those locations for hopefully future photographers and people without cameras? So I think we've covered pretty much everything from our do's and don'ts list. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, that was kind of a blazing fast episode. I'm sure I'll think of 20 other things, do's and don'ts after we wrap this up. But I feel like this is definitely the type of conversation that can be ongoing. And as technology changes, as laws change, as drone laws change, as the FAA, they're going to crack down, are they not? There are a lot of...
That's a whole nother podcast as well.
It's a whole nother podcast. So, the do's and don'ts list will continue, I think, long into the future as technology changes and as our environment changes. And so I think we've covered some pretty good ones there. Stuff that I like to think that I have, as you mentioned before, built into the muscle memory. But it feels good to kind of air them out in the real world. Because I'm pretty sure that I am an egregious lawbreaker of just about everything that we've talked about here. And it's nice to be able to stop, take a step back, be like, wait, what would good judgment do in this situation? Okay, don't go over that fence and get too close to the cliff edge. All right, cool.
And one thing we didn't mention, we talked about this before we got started, and I think it's one thing that I'd like to add on to the end of this as a do not, kind of a segue from the don't be stupid. Don't vandalize, don't break things. You had a great story you were telling me about the juniper tree in Colorado Springs. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So there was this guy, I'd probably been 20 years ago now, who went and took a picture of a tree overlooking Garden of the Gods. And then he promptly, after his picture was made, he promptly cut the tree down so that no one else would ever be able to take that picture. So here he is selfishly thinking that I'm going to increase the value of my one picture, when in fact, he basically just desecrated the landscape. I'm pretty sure the guy went to jail because he kind of promoted this fact that this tree is no longer there because he cut it down. So yeah, don't be stupid. Don't vandalize, and don't place an impact on the environment that you think is going to make your picture more special. If you cut down a tree, or if you spray paint a rock, or if you do something to destroy a location so that other people cannot take that same picture, you are not welcome in the landscape photography community. You are an outcast. You are a heretic, and you deserve to go to jail. And if I ever see somebody vandalizing something out in the woods, I will make sure that they go straight to the ranger station. So I hate to kind of end up on that kind of hard-ass note like that, but, just be smart. Respect nature. It's that simple.
Right, and it all kind of comes back to being good stewards of the outdoors, the resources that we have, these amazing things that we get to shoot. Will someone in 10 years be able to shoot the same things unvandalized, undestroyed, uneroded from hundreds of thousands of footsteps? And everybody, I think it's a good kind of note to end on. Everybody can do their part, picking up the litter, staying on the trash, planning ahead, all these little things that kind of we as landscape photographers kind of take for granted as common sense or muscle memory in the back of our brain. New people to landscape may not be thinking about that. So I think that's good, important knowledge to be sharing, so it does become that muscle memory for other landscape photographers of the future.
Yeah. Just be courteous, be kind, plan ahead, don't be stupid, and help other people out. It's that simple.
Be kind, rewind. I think that's a good spot to wrap up this podcast. Lewis, where can we find your imagery, your fine art landscape photographs that I can buy a print of?
Yeah, thank you very much. I can be found at lewiscarlyle.com. That's LEWISCARLYLE.com. I've been all around America, have some really great work, and I would be more than delighted to share it with the audience for sure. Also have a lot of fun videos.
Perfect. Yeah, check out Lewis's website and check him out on YouTube as well. So that is all for this podcast of our do's and don'ts of landscape photography. Hopefully you guys learned something, learned a couple tips and tricks to just kind of be a better representative of landscape photographers. So that's all for this podcast. Make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe for more podcasts like this. Until next time, get out and go shoot.